In my childhood, I was sexually abused for about 10 years by my father, and I was also a victim of pedocriminality by other people. My father was generally a violent person with control over the family, with a narcissistic personality. And then there are even more perverse and premeditated and well thought out things. For example, there were very organized games, and in fact it made that little by little there was a drift towards the abnormal, until we get to rape or very pronounced assaults. And so, for example, in games, these are games that pass for children's games, but which in fact are diverted. So, for example, there was the dismemberment of the rabbit. So there it was. We play hide and seek, removing an article of clothing when found each round. So basically, it's a bit like hide and seek, except it's a hide and seek that goes very wrong. The hanged pig. So even when we think about it, by the way, when I think back, it's a bit violent like us, but the hanged pig, so there it was. We take it by the feet, we swing it. It can be a normal game with a kid, except that each time the pajamas fall off. The pajamas falling off once can happen. An example I often use to illustrate this point. But when every night we play hangman in the living room and every night the pajamas fall off, maybe it would have been good for someone to ask the question. What we can imagine is that traumas already have a physiological impact, in fact, on the way we will develop, even neurologically, and then of course on the psyche. We know that a child's development is essential to the adult we will become. Basically, when I was still a child, around my 11 years, I started to have big phases of sadness, but still a bit childish. The condition manifested as it often does in children. I cried frequently in my bed and had difficulty sleeping. And I feel that basically I was rather a little girl, I think, cheerful, joyful, rather energetic and greedy, who live a lot of things and who experience difficult things. And so I found myself a bit split in two. The apparent ease with which I talk about it, it's an appearance, it's a bit of a mask. And clearly, yes, it's quite representative of what I was talking about, which is the fact of being a bit split in two and therefore being dissociated. Traumatic memory, it expresses itself in several ways, and so we can feel pain in the body. For example, when I'm going to have nightmares, sometimes I have the stomach pains again that I could have during certain physical violence. And then there are also the violences that we do to ourselves or desires to get out of our body. There are moments when I would like to remove my skin and get out, and so I can have quite violent gestures in moments of crisis with myself. In my case, it's frequently connected to crises which also manifest as bipolarity. It's not necessarily the case for everyone, but for example, for me, it can be phases where indeed this pain will come out in a very intense way, and which will gradually make me sink into depression because I can't untangle myself from it. Or it can be what we call psychotic episodes. That's the same. There are people who are bipolar, who have them, others who don't, where these are moments when I lose my mind actually. And it can be, for the record, in a phase of manic joy or in a very dark phase, on the contrary. And there I completely lose control of myself, and so I can put myself in danger, want to hurt myself, or just have delusional ideas, or talk to people who are not there, or hear voices. It manifests in many different ways, but it's a loss of contact with reality. Sometimes what has been really hard to live with is that it has sometimes declared itself. At times in my life when, frankly, I was doing really well and I had accomplished a lot and I was fulfilled, and all of a sudden it drifts into depression, and after, usually when I really start to be in that depression, indeed there are a lot of things from my childhood that come out in a more or less conscious way or not. I was still really a bit of a life bulimic in a 100-mile-an-hour spiral at that time. Plus I was a teenager. I believe hormones and other factors also play a role. And so I resumed my daily life doing lots of great stuff. And besides, it was high school. So for me, I was more in the future. Anyway, I'm going to be an adult. I'm going to leave home, so it will be easier because I will leave some of my past behind. And then the last depression I went through, I experienced it extremely badly because already I was in a life that I liked, and because for once I had already gone through several deep depressions, and that one was even deeper. I ended up resorting to acts of violence against myself that I had never done before to end my days because I couldn't take it anymore. I was telling myself, even when I have built all this, it's going well. I have a life that is generally balanced. It hits me, and it hits me in an even more violent and deeper way. Eventually it becomes utterly discouraging. Now that I'm improving, I'm entertaining the idea again, wondering what if it had occurred, though I hope it didn't. Look at what you've come back from and you thought you'd never come back. Many events occurred from when I was 15 until my diagnosis at 19. I began studying design while having a boyfriend and living life at a fast pace. In my 4 hours a night, I never stopped. I wasn't tired. I was somewhat successful in everything I undertook with a certain ease. And then I had a summer after another year where I worked like crazy, and at the same time I was going out at night. I took some drugs, I did a bit of everything, and I went on vacation and I was in a global euphoria. I was dating someone with undiagnosed bipolar disorder at the time. We got caught in a spiral of our own little universe. And in fact, when I came back from vacation, I had spent a vacation in Greece, a bit in hippie mode. There, everything collapsed, and for once I really hid my discomfort and my depression. From September to early January, I experienced a psychotic episode at the age of 19 due to the responsibility of caring for my loved ones. I lost it, I wanted to get out of my body, so I took off my clothes, I ran all night in the street, I went to find my mother. I was utterly distressed, unable to see or orient myself, completely in the dark. I ended up in the psychiatric hospital for a diagnosis. In my case, it was a bit of a poisoned gift. At the same time, it allows to explain certain things that happened and to say then, I might be able to solve the problem. And in fact, we realize that the problem is deep, there is not a single end by which to treat it, and that probably we have it for years, or for life, or with different phases. So it's been about 1.5 years that I treat the root of the problem more. I take care of my traumas and do psychotherapy now, which I didn't do before. It's still facing the worst things that have happened to you in your life and that you've spent your life putting away from you. And all of a sudden you go into it. For that matter, I didn't really see how to get over it. And moreover, the more I did this work, the more also other memories, other violent stuff came back to me. So it was more pain to face. And once I managed to get through a little bit of that, indeed now I'm doing better too, because I'm able to identify certain things. And I have a bit of hope personally that precisely there is a very specific root, and that there are some testimonies that have come out on this, and some books that exist and some studies, but it remains a bit emerging. The notion of eventually overcoming one's disorder and living with it, possibly with some symptoms, but much milder and without medication. And that it's true that it's a hope I have for myself. And during my very deep depression at the hospital, it was quite complicated. It didn't go very well. And so I really had the desire to tell myself, but we need a house outside of hospitals. We need a place where we can go. We must also stop solely caring for moments of distress and crisis. And so I brought up the idea of the perched house again. And so our goal is especially to say that, in fact, we are capable like everyone else. We have qualities like everyone else. I work full-time, have freelanced for years, and finished my studies. We must acknowledge that the disorder doesn't express itself the same way in everyone. Like some people with the disorder can't go all the way within the same disorder. You have to understand that it's a spectrum. And that's also why I'm telling my story today. This doesn't define bipolar disorder. It's to show that being bipolar is more than just this.